To the honourable member for Leeds, Granville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
$1 billion green slush fund. From a government that claims that they're serious about the environment. They take $1 billion and they find every possible way to line the pockets of Liberal insiders with that money. It's incredibly disappointing for Canadians who once believed in this NDP-Liberal government. But they've seen, after 9 years of this Prime Minister and his broken promises and his insider dealing, that he's just not worth the cost. And we know from the Auditor General's bombshell report this week that, again, he's not worth the corruption. How many conflicts of interest do you think that we could find at the $1 billion green slush fund? 1, 2, 3. Well, hold on. I'm going to give you the number in a second. But let's talk about 2 conflicts of interest. One, by the hand-picked chair, hand-picked by this NDP-Liberal Prime Minister, Annette Verschaeren, under investigation by the Conflict of Interest Commissioner. Another hand-picked Liberal appointee, Guy Ouimet, under investigation by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. So is the number 2? Is the number 90? 90 conflicts of interest, where $76 million of funding was awarded to projects where there were connections to the Liberals' friends appointed to roles within the SDTC, the slush fund. It's 186 conflicts of interest that the Auditor General found. It's unbelievable. And true, like with this Auditor General finding, as it was with the Auditor General's report into the government's failed $60 million Arrive scam, this NDP-Liberal government will do everything they can to avoid accountability. We heard from the minister he was going to take tough action, and as soon as they found out, they were going to get to the bottom of it. They've been dragged, kicking and screaming this entire time. Finally, this week, we thought that we had some signs of life in terms of accountability from the minister when he shut down their corrupt slush fund, but he just rolled it into his ministry to make it a little harder to track and hope that nobody notices the grift that's going to continue to go on. But was there an Auditor General report to the Green Slush Fund, the $1 billion slush fund, because the Liberals wanted to check on what was going on at this arm's length organization? No. Conservatives had to call for there to be an investigation. Like with the $60 million Arrive scam. We took a vote in this House, and we heard from the Liberals that anyone who broke the rules is going to be held accountable, and they took it all very seriously, and everything was above board. Of course it wasn't. And the Prime Minister, his front bench, and all of his MPs voted against accountability when they voted against an Auditor General report that uncovered massive corruption in that case. Of course, the RCMP are going to need to investigate here. Why? Because of alleged and potential criminal wrongdoing. Just like we saw with what was going on with CBSA, with the Arrive scam, with the Bottler project. And after Conservatives raised the matter, and the truth starts coming to light, well, the RCMP start kicking people's doors in. We're dragging people in front of the House of Commons because they're lying to parliamentary committees. That's not acceptable. And it's certainly not going to do anything for the environment. Like not a dollar from their $1 billion slush fund was intended to. You'll hear in responses today them talk about, well, Conservatives set this whole thing up. They're telling on themselves, because they say, of course, that Conservatives don't take care for the environment. But we wanted Canadians to be able to innovate in this space. We wanted there to be a partnership with government. But after 9 years of this Liberal government, they just turned it into another piggy bank for their buddies to line their pockets. We saw that with the CEO who had to resign in disgrace, and their directors who had to resign in disgrace. And bonuses, paying themselves bonuses, instead of course, supporting the innovators. But that's very much the hallmark of what we expect from a tired government that seems to be found in these cases of corruption almost weekly. We had the minister from Edmonton this week claim that at a company that he's a partner in, he wholly owns an Alberta numbered company that owns 50% of a company called GHI, that he seems to have been continuing to operate while he's a cabinet minister, which of course is against the law. And the text messages that were revealed in Global News talk about Randy and Randy wanting a partner and there needing to be a partner call. And the minister has been very clear that he says it's another Randy. And well, we want to know who that is. But he didn't come to committee and tell us. He didn't come to committee and say, oh, that's Randy Smith. I don't know. He said, I don't know who that is. I said, well, don't you own half the company? No, I don't, he claimed. Well, who owns half the company? Well, Alberta, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, who owns that company? He says, well, I do. Even on straightforward matters, they can't tell the truth. Every week, sometimes multiple times a week, we find scandals with this government. The handpicked board chair at the $1 billion slush fund. Why is she being looked at by an officer of parliament, by the ethics commissioner? Well, she voted to give herself $220,000. How does that help the environment? What does that do for Canadians in a cost of living crisis? I've said it before, that these Liberals aren't worried about the lines at the food bank. They're worried about lining the pockets of Liberal insiders. We've learned that the member for Calgary Skyview was told of corruption at the Green Slush Fund by whistleblowers in 2022. Well, I checked the Hansard. He didn't talk about it in here. And if he talked about it in his caucus with the NDP-Liberal Prime Minister, well, the Prime Minister didn't seem too worried about it. Neither did the minister, who gets very animated when we talk about this subject and claim that Conservatives are attacking a sacred institution. Well, it's sacred to Liberal insiders who are getting fat off of the pork that the Liberals are shoveling into this organization. I want to offer a quote from a senior public servant who was captured in an audio recording that was released by a whistleblower on this. Because the officials knew how bad it was. So we know the minister knew how bad it was. He said, and I quote, "It was free money. This is almost sponsorship scandal level kind of giveaway," end quote. Can you imagine? As bad as the 2000s era sponsorship scandal under the Chrétien Liberals, and it barely raises an alarm bell after 9 years of this NDP-Liberal government. Well, Conservatives want accountability. That's why we asked for the Auditor General to investigate. And Conservatives want Canadians to be able to have confidence in their public institutions, and that's why the RCMP need to be able to see the full of the documents from the $1 billion slush fund. It's $120 million in ineligible payments, and Canadians want their money back.
Questions and comments? Questions et comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Well, Madam Speaker, there's no member more so in the Conservative Reform Party that continuously harps on one issue, and that is, you name it, and he adds the word scandal to it. Whether it's real or not, Madam Speaker, that's his job. And quite frankly, Madam Speaker, when you take a look at this, when you try to look in terms of what has actually transpired, contrary to what the member tries to give the false impression, that in fact, that when it was discovered, the government did take actions. And those actions ultimately led to the National Auditor General taking a look, and then the report. And then when the report came out, there was a consequence. The board no longer exists, Madam Speaker, and now it's being run through NRC. I'm wondering if the member might want to reflect on, maybe he overuses the word corruption, because he uses it all the time, Madam Speaker, and I wouldn't mind to do a contrast between Stephen Harper and corruption versus our...
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Granville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
If they're tired of me talking about their corruption, they should stop being corrupt. This parliamentary secretary, these Liberals, that Prime Minister, they didn't ask for the Auditor General to investigate. I want to refresh his memory. Conservatives had to call for an emergency meeting to have a letter, to have this issue raised to the Auditor General. Conservatives had to do that. And the process gets obstructed every step of the way by these Liberals who want to cover up their corruption. If they don't like being called corrupt, stop with all the corruption.
Honourable Député Shefford.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. We're in 2024. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech, and I hope that he can hear me. We're in 2024, Madam Speaker, 19 years after the Auditor General in 2005. SDTC still exists. There's a lack of control over public funds. The issues raised in 2005 were not fixed. And so with today's motion, the Conservatives would like to try and make it a Liberal scandal. But Madam Speaker, who was in power in between 2005 and 2015? So I think it should be a Conservative Liberal scandal. We see that this issue transcends parties. It's been an issue for a long time throughout governance. It's not just the Liberals that have mismanaged this, it's the Conservatives back in the day as well.
Granville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
I have good news for my honourable colleague from the bloc. From the Office of the Auditor General, in the year 2017, the Auditor General offered a clean bill of health to the Conservative established Sustainable Development Technologies Canada. But what happened after that was an Auditor General report that looked at the period thereafter, when the NDP-Liberal government was in power. And what happened? Corruption, 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 call in the Mounties.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The Honourable Member for the Bay of Quinte. Bay of Quinte.
Yes.
Bay of Quinte.
Oh, thank you. Yes, you got it right. Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, the response to this government, it's incredible to Canadians. It's not just in this issue, in this scandal. It's been so many this morning. In the Security and Public Safety Committee meeting this morning, when they're trying to figure out foreign interference, certain MPs were involved in foreign interference in foreign entities on our own soil. The member from Uxbridge Pickering said, Uxbridge said, boo-hoo, get over it, when it came to looking into these issues. Well, it was a perfect response, because when we look at this scandal, and this epic scandal for Canadians, of course, the government says, well, in fact, boo-hoo, get over it. We're going to fold this into the government. You know, it's nothing to see here, even though it's much. Madam Speaker, should Canadians get over it?
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Granville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Well, obviously, very concerning comments raised by my honourable colleague from Bay of Quinte. Of course, Canadians shouldn't get over it on the question of foreign interference and people acting in the interest of foreign state actors while serving in this House of Commons. This is a scandal that's incredibly important that Canadians have transparency on. They want the RCMP to be able to review these documents, and Canadians need to be able to get their money back. It's $120 million. Let's get serious.